we've also established that I've got quite a loud voice.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I once was told that I dominated the mic.
Oh.
Dominate.
Was that in
Just
like
dominate
a rap,
something.
Was that in a rap battle or
Oh,
something?
I really wish it was, actually. I just think to myself, maybe there's a whole new career for me out there.
Yeah.
A rapper.
Dominating mics all
Yeah.
over the country.
I've got a really quiet voice, and I literally have to be like that to talk into the mic, because otherwise no one will hear me. But Giles is like confident.
Giles, tone it down.
I know. I'm a whisper. But even my whisper, I don't remember it's the headphones. Even the whisper sounds quite loud.
Yeah.
Whisper.
Do you think it's the?
Go on,
it
whisper,
must be the
Giles.
resonate, like the frequencies, maybe.
Yeah, vibrations of your
It's
your
guttural.
Oh.
Radha, thank you for coming to see us. It's lovely to see you. Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to see you
Yeah.
both in the flesh
I
in
know.
3D. It's lovely. Thank
3D.
you.
We exist.
Now, I love this book.
Oh,
It's fantastic.
thank you, Giles.
There's a piece in it that
Wait, sorry, Giles. Just because this is a podcast and people can't see, it is rather. It's not like the Bible or something.
yeah, your book.
I love this book that I've brought.
Yeah, know your own power.
The Tiger Who Came to Tea.
Right.
I'll slip Sophie a tenner for that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Know
What-
your own power.
Know your own power. Well, that's how I wanted to start. Actually, when did you discover your own power? Because there's a bit in the book where you talk about alarms going off. Was there? Did you have an alarm?
Not
that went
actual
off?
alarms.
Not actual alarms, but like a physical alarm. I guess a mental alarm. When did you have a moment when your alarm went off?
That's a really good question. I think I did, in the sense that I remember one moment just bizarrely being on the tube in the London Underground, and I don't know, I was just standing there, not really thinking about anything in particular, and it suddenly just hit me that piece of advice which I wish everyone had been told at school or when they were little, is that actually, you know, your thoughts are not necessarily who you are, and actually kind of awareness of your thoughts and sort of how your thoughts dictate your life and your story. And I remember just having this moment where I just thought, oh my God, that's incredible, because that means that actually I can now, you know, because I was always a bit of a worrier. I was a bit of a sensitive child. I was told I was a sensitive child. And I felt
I'm like
things
that too.
deeply. Yeah, exactly. And so I did, you know, when I was younger and growing up, I did struggle with sort of worry and feeling things very deeply. And I always sort of, I'm one of those people who's like, right, I want to understand something. I want to try and understand it so I can basically just, you know, just work it out and just work out a solution. I'm quite a solution-based person. And I remember just realising that for that moment, thinking, oh my goodness me, why doesn't everybody know this? And why aren't we teaching this? And why aren't we telling people this? Because yes, of course, thoughts come and go and they dictate our emotions and our actions. But actually, if we were to understand that we can be aware of those thoughts, see them, and sort of question them or not be with them, then we have so much power over our own lives and over each moment and how we interpret things, how we relate to other people. Basically, the basis of all life.
Yeah.
That happened on the Central Line, I think. So.
Were you, at the time, were you having particularly negative thoughts, or was it just like an epiphany that came out of nowhere?
I wasn't having particularly negative thoughts. I think I was just always someone who struggled with sort of worry and being like, what if? And I'd always need a lot of reassurance when I was growing up. I'd always need someone to tell me like, it'll be all right, it'll be okay, even though I knew it would be. And so I think I was just, it wasn't a particularly bad moment, but I think I'd just been really interested in understanding myself more, understanding how things worked. And I am when people say to me, what's your book about? I say, well, it's kind of a little bit about how to get through life and how to do life. And I think we all wish sometimes we had rules, or someone would just tell us a little bit about how to do life, how to manage stuff. Yeah. So I think for me, I've got a very curious mind. I'm always kind of wanting to read and understand, mainly to kind of, I suppose, manage things and make sure that, you know, the time I've got on this earth, that I do my best, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so for the listeners that don't know you, are you still a general practitioner?
Yes, so I'm a medical doctor. Yeah, I'm working in A&E at the moment, but
wow.
General practitioner. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in the medical field, which is very sort of science and medicine based. And I guess what I took away from your book is it is more, I don't want to say spiritual, but it is kind of, there's some kind of element of looking within, and it doesn't seem as stereotypically medical coming from a medical professional like you.
Yeah, that's so true. And actually I was approached by a lot of different publishers about different books, but whenever I spoke to them, they would always be very much like, you're a medical doctor, do a medical book, do a medical thing, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I thought to myself, my parents wrote books and edited books. They were psychologists. And I always thought, I know how much work it is. And I always thought, if I'm going to do a book, I really want to make sure that it's mine and that it's something a bit different. And it's something a bit unusual. And it's something that I really am passionate about. So yeah, you're right. It's not, I have got the title doctor on the front cover. But it's not typically medical. It's very much really about life skills and about I think we're not very good at connecting what happens to us in life with our health and how we feel. So I think we're better at talking about mental health, we're better at talking about emotional health, but we still haven't really got the connection between life and what happens day to day and basically how that impacts our physical, mental and emotional health. And our health is just so much more than even, I think, physical and mental. I think it's just about, it's everything. It's our relationships, it's our finances, it's our, our day-to-day strategies about what we do, it's our purpose, our job, everything you can think of contributes to how we feel and how well we are. And so I was really keen on just opening up the conversation around actually what makes us happy, because when we're happy or even when we're peaceful, we can then if a challenge comes up or a physical health challenge comes up or a mental health challenge comes up, we can deal with that better. So it's all about laying the foundations and going back to basics. I think we've become so complicated, which is great in one way because we need the complication sometimes, but sometimes the complication kind of draws us away from actually what is really helpful.
Yeah, I love that, what you said about creating a foundation, because I think there's so much out there at the moment in the space of self-development, and there's tools and things that people say to do, and it's almost like plastering over the cracks. But then I can only speak for myself when I say that, if I'm in a really peaceful place where everything's going great and I'm doing all these, meditation and stuff like that, yoga, and I feel great, and then the minute life really takes off and I'm busy and I'm coming up to London and doing this, having meetings and stuff, all of that just falls by the wayside. I think that's really common to sort of struggle to put those things into practice in everyday life.
Definitely. And I think the other thing that I'm really keen on I suppose, trying to live. I mean, Giles will tell you, he knows me a bit better. I know you, Sophie, but not as well. Yeah. But Giles will tell you I don't always follow my own advice, but I do try to. But I think one of the really key things to our well-being is not just about thinking that we're able to feel better in each moment or we're able to continue those strategies. I think it's actually really about being able to trust ourselves or know that whatever happens, we've got something in us that we can try to help us feel better with. And that, I suppose, that's where I thought for a long time about the title of the book. That's where the title of the book came from, is to really, once you know your own power, you can trust some elements of yourself to have the resources, or at least to try, or at least to reach out for support. Once you have that trust in yourself, then life becomes less scary. And then when we approach life with less fear, we're open to more things, we have better relationships, we don't kind of grab onto stuff and live out this idea of scarcity. So I think just understanding that process of trusting yourself, I think actually goes beyond even more at the foundation of any of those strategies.
So if you were someone who's starting to sort of question, how they're living their lives and stuff, what are the sort of warning signs we can be looking for in ourselves? I know it's something you talk about in the book, these sort of warning signs that we can start to have a bit more self-reflection. What are the kind of warning signs that we should be sort of looking out for?
It sounds a bit scary, doesn't
it?
Well, the warning signs.
Yeah.
Sure, that's in a song somewhere.
But for ourselves and others, I guess, as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And other people as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really powerful, actually, Sophie, is that you can, we learn stuff for ourselves, but we also learn it for other people, and we learn from other people. And that's what I find really lovely about life as well. So warning signs, I guess that's a sort of the first chapter, if you like, of the book. And that's because, I look back in my own life when I was writing this book and thinking, when things got really bad, did I know that they weren't right? And I was like, yeah, I did really. But, for many years, sometimes for months, sometimes decades, we just kind of push things down. We don't want to look at them because we're frightened of change. We're frightened of doing anything different. And even if we're unhappy, we choose to sit in unhappiness over being uncertain or not knowing what's going to happen, which is really interesting. And that happens for people at the right time. There's no right or wrong to that. But some warning signs might be, for example, recurrent themes that are happening in life. So, recurrent arguments in your relationship, kind of just that feeling in your stomach that something's not quite right. At work, for example, realizing you're not really fulfilling what you want to do, being dissatisfied, being angry, irritable, or just generally feeling very lost. I think sometimes we're told so often to live our lives in a certain way, in a very templated way. We tend to follow that, and we tend to believe that that's what's going to bring us happiness. And then one day we realise, we wake up, well, hang on a minute, I've got this, that and the other, but I'm still not happy. So what was that story about? So even just realising that even though on the outside your life looks great, but feeling that kind of emptiness is, I think, a bit of a warning sign as well. And again, sometimes life has to like ring the bell really loudly. Like an alarm clock to be like, hello, are you listening? I'm trying to tell you something. And again, there's no, like I said before, there's no right or wrong answer to that or when it happens. But I think it's interesting just to be a little bit more aware, so that the next time you get a little warning sign, you can just pick up on it a little bit faster and potentially change something a little bit sooner.
Yeah, I think hindsight is 20/20. I've definitely been in a position where, for me, my sort of warning sign is anxiety. So the minute I start feeling a little bit anxious, that usually progresses into like full-blown anxiety. And then I'll have a big wake-up call where something will happen, and then I'll be forced to make changes. But then I look back in hindsight and I'm like, oh, actually, I was feeling anxious for months and months and I didn't pick up on that. So I guess it's about having a good understanding of yourself and sitting with yourself.
Before it's breaking point, I guess.
Yeah. And just understanding how you work and how your body works as well, I guess.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a bit like if you think about, training for the marathon or running or whatever it might be, you get a bit of a twinge in your ankle, you're like, oh, that's fine, it'll be all right, I'll whack a bit of gel on it, put an ankle support on it, and then you carry on going until you're out for a run, and then you're like, oh, hang on a minute, this is really not right, and now I can't even run that race I was going to run in the first place. So I think, big life events and crises, some of those things we can't avoid, some of those things we can't ever predict, but the ones that we do get some sense of that are imminent on their way, I think it just takes so much energy to sort of get out of that crisis. I just wondered in my book, really, is there a way for us to actually look at that a bit earlier and to expend less energy, I suppose, on that as well?
I'm not sure what Sophie's doing.
Turning the fridge off.
That's right. I'm gonna have a little
Have a swig, yeah.
swig.
Interrupting me.
I thought what I was saying was so profound that
No, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
I know what the warning signs are. I can sort them out now.
Yeah. I need to do something. I need to make that phone.
I started talking about anxiety.
Oh dear. Anyway, sorry. Continuing. We'll edit that out.
I was slightly changing the tone a little bit. I was going to talk about toxic positivity because it seems to be quite a hot topic still. And obviously in the self-help space, which we've talked about, like the idea around self-help and, often people will jump from one self-help book to another. Is that something that you're aware of? And also, that feels like a kind of trendy sort of phrase, like the toxic positivity, but I guess it's finding that sweet spot, isn't it, between promoting some sort of positivity and outlook on life, but then not doing the over.
Yeah. I think, like you say, positivity, anything in extreme is not healthy. And that includes positivity and negativity. So we can, one of the things that I believe is that we can reframe things, whatever's happening outside or around us, we can reframe those things in any which way we like, or we choose, or we learn the strategies to do so. But, we going to the other extreme where we're literally like, oh, everything's fine and it's all wonderful, is just called denial, isn't it? Or self-sabotage, or just pushing things away. So that's not helpful either, and that's actually more of a technique, I think, to not address problems and comes out of fear. I think what I'm an advocate of more so is action. And by that, I mean doing something. I don't mean necessarily overtly doing something where people can see, oh, I've made a big life change. But I just mean some kind of action, whether or not that's reflecting, learning, doing small little actions, whatever it might be. I think action takes us towards something. There's an energy behind action of any kind. And interestingly, sometimes, inaction can be just as destructive as the wrong action.
Right.
So I think sometimes when we're talking about self-esteem and confidence and changing your life, we sometimes think, I've got to do something really massive and really big. Actually, it's the opposite. Or we wait for that to come. And I think the opposite is true, that if we can just start small things, they're actually really helpful. I'm not an advocate of sort of self-help. That term to me has been associated now with, like you said, Giles, kind of people telling you what to do, telling you how to live your life, being very sort of top-down, authoritarian, or making you feel bad, or making you feel like you have to fix yourself or there's something wrong with you. And I think all of those things are actually just really unhealthy.
Yeah.
And if anyone was to say those sort of things to me, I'd just be like feeling worse about myself. So I've always tried to, anyway, get a balance between, putting ideas out there for people to take up if they want to, if they resonate with them, but also to be really real about it. The worst thing you can do to anybody if they're worrying is say, oh, don't worry, it's fine. It's like, what? You don't understand.
Yeah,
So to be real. And I think to do that, it's really helpful to go back into your own life and how you feel and what do other people need to hear. That person, if I'm doing the radio or something like that, or TV, I often sit there and I think, imagine someone sitting in their bedroom somewhere in the country and I think, what do they need to hear right now? What would I want to hear that would make me feel either better or make me feel like there's a possibility of something getting better in the future? And that's how I try to frame the advice that I give.
Yeah, I mean, we're all human at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and humans are meant to feel the whole range of human emotions. There's a whole spectrum of emotions. Nobody's really doing anybody any favors by just sticking to positivity and kind of like keeping on going through life like, no, everything's great, everything's fine, because I think that's when a lot of people do get to that point when they just snap and they can't anymore. And sometimes, like for some people, having a good cry is one of those tools that they need to use to be able to sort of like express themselves and then move on from something.
Definitely. And there's actually a chapter in the book called Giving Up, because I think there's a message that when something happens in our lives, just carry on, it'll be fine. When relationships break down or things like that, like, just move on, just get rid of the photos of that person, rip them up and just move on, get on with it. And actually in that chapter I wanted to say to people, do you know what, it's okay to give up for a bit. It's not on yourself.
Yeah.
But just give up on, being so hard on yourself and people telling you to just get up and get on with it, and to there's a time for that, but choosing when that time is right for you. So I really wanted to say to people, actually, yes, there's loads of stuff about motivation and keep on going and change this. But you know what, we don't hear enough of the other side, which is rest, relax. Like, you've been through a lot, take your time, just give up on having to, present this facade to the world that actually isn't how you're feeling, because it's just going to make you feel worse.
Yeah, well, I was going to say on the back of that, there's things like setting boundaries, and that's something again you touch on in the book, and the power of no, I suppose, in that. And actually, we're not very good at that.
Generally. No, I'm not very.
I'm terrible.
I'm not very good at that at all.
I'm a people pleaser, so I'm the worst.
Yeah. I've got better at sort of saying no, but I wasn't very good at all when I was growing up and I was younger, and I still am. I still wobble sometimes in terms of saying no. But I think boundaries are so important for many reasons. Obviously for relationships and having healthy relationships, and kind of having those dynamics that actually kind of nurture you and don't end up becoming dysfunctional, because you can start off with quite a healthy relationship, but if people are just saying yes to everything, slowly, if you think about like a Venn diagram, two circles overlapping each other, they're going to get swallowed up. One person's going to get swallowed up by that. So in relationships it's really important, but I think also boundaries help you actually build your self-esteem and recognise, it's almost like a reflection of your own self-worth. You're saying to the world and to other people, these are the things I'm going to accept and these are things I'm not going to accept. And by doing that, you're not only increasing your self-esteem and confidence when they actually respond positively to that, but you're also actually saying to yourself, you're getting clearer about who you are and what you're about, and actually your values. And I think values sounds like a really old-fashioned word, values. It's all like kind of, like people are telling you must have very good values. I don't mean it in that sense. I mean who you are, what's important to you, what matters to you. And I think once you know your values, you can then start aligning, hopefully, your work, how you live, your relationships, all the things that you do in life with those values. And then life becomes a lot easier, because you don't get in these conflicts in your mind where you're like, oh, should I have done that? Shouldn't I have done that? I'm not quite sure. So I think getting clearer, again, it's boundaries are another way of getting clearer about who you are.
And having a bit more autonomy over your decisions.
Yes, 100%. And again, autonomy is one of the keys to happiness, isn't it? So when we have, freedom of choice, when we're able to do what we want to do, we have a sense of, our ability to determine our own future, then actually we're happier. And then the people around us are happier as well.
Yeah, I wonder, when you talk about values, I know you say it sounds like an old-fashioned thing, but I think values are so important to us. And actually, I'd be interested to know how many people actually know what their values are. Like, if you say to someone, what are your values, if they're able to even answer that question, because I don't know if I don't know if enough of us take the time to really sit with that and think, what are they? And maybe that might be a good way of kind of working out where you need to start setting boundaries in your life. If something's not quite right and you know that you need to start saying no, but you're not sure what to say no to, you just know you haven't got much time or whatever, maybe sitting with your values and questioning what's important to me and what needs to go, kind of thing, might be a sort of good place to
I think that's
start.
a really handy thing to, like, a little exercise to do. And sometimes you might even just pick that up in different scenarios. Scenarios come up in life, with friendships or at work, and you're like, I'm not quite sure about this. And then some of those scenarios, if you like, if someone was to write down the most kind of cringeworthy or the most awful scenarios you'd have to deal with, like, how would you choose? What would you choose? And actually, what does that tell you about yourself? And then how does that inform you in terms of where you want to put your energy in life and what you want to do?
I think boundaries and guilt often go hand in hand as well. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of it. I think you're sort of, you can feel guilty about it as well, Giles. If you kind of have to put draw a line in the sand and say no to something or not let somebody cross that boundary, and you start to question yourself, like, oh God, am I a bad person? Like, are people going to hate me? Like, it's different. It's an uncomfortable thing, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's where that's probably that. I'm like that as well. Like, I probably that little bit of that people pleaser. Why am I doing this for someone? Why am I saying yes? Is it for me, or is it because I just don't want them to hate me? I don't want them to abandon me, or I don't want them to think badly of me. And I think guilt is really interesting because we get guilt mixed up. I think, well, I certainly do, or I have done, where, guilt is very much about, an emotion when you feel like you've done something wrong, it's very different. That's very different to actually just stating what you want or what's important to you or what you're able to do. And I think those two things are really different. But again, you'll come across people in life, and I'm sure everyone listening can relate to this some way or the other, where the people around you will want to make you feel guilty. So what are their agendas, what are their intentions, why are they doing that, what is in play in that dynamic of that relationship. And again, it may not be anything that they're intending to do harmfully, but it's just because, a bit like we have rules in a game, if you like, there are rules in a relationship that get established and dynamics get established. And when you try to break free of those rules or change the rules and change yourself, the other party's like, hang on a minute, but this is how we've always played the game. What are you doing? I don't understand why you're changing these rules.
You're cheating.
It worked perfectly well before.
Yeah.
And then you'll get, you might get a variety of reactions: anger, resentment, manipulation, withdrawal or abandonment. So it's just interesting to see, it's almost a little bit of a game to see how that person's reacting and why, and to stick firm to how, the new path you want to go down. And maybe that person will fall away, they won't be in your life anymore. Maybe they have to be in your life and you just have to work out a different way of being with them. But I think human relationships are very interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
like the understatement of the year.
No, but yeah. Yeah, that's going on the podcast.
Yeah, we'll use that. I was going to say, it's interesting because when we're talking about setting boundaries, we're obviously coming from a place of self-work and establishing boundaries for ourselves. And I guess setting boundaries with somebody, they can often then take it as a personal thing and it's all about them. So it's kind of like, oh, it's because they don't like me, or I'm not good enough, or all of their sort of triggers and emotions get brought up. But really it's about the person who's setting the boundary, and it's about them doing the work on themselves and trying to improve their life in some way. It's important to remember it's not a personal thing.
No, but it's tricky because obviously sometimes you're setting a boundary and that other person doesn't know you're setting the boundary. necessarily, unless you have a good enough relationship where you can talk
to
about
be like, I'm setting a boundary with you now.
Like the reason why I haven't texted you back.
Well, it's kind of like the difference between having a verbal boundary where you're saying, actually, this does not sit right with me, I'm saying no to this, and then sort of more of an energetic boundary where you actually just sort of withdraw for your own mental health or whatever it might be. So there's different ways of going about that. You don't necessarily have to have a conversation where you say, I'm not going to talk to you for a while because you're doing my head in.
Yeah, that would be tricky. I
was just thinking about, like a written contract you get for a job, or like having that for a relationship would be really interesting, like subclause 2A part 3.
It's like the big
one minute, you haven't read subclause part A. It does say that we can still text every other day.
You will not stay in the bathroom for longer than 7 minutes. But you're right. There are sort of energetics, aren't there, that people feel and people pick up on. Well, sometimes not actually. Sometimes people don't really have a sense of that, and you have to be really overt and obvious. But I used to think, and I think I was sort of told this, is that if you're friends with someone, you have to be friends with them forever. Otherwise, you're a bad person. And I've slowly realised that's just not true. And it's interesting because we just expect all of us to stay the same, but we're constantly changing all the time. When I came here on the way to the studio, I'll have had experiences this morning, whether or not I've seen things or heard things, or we're that affects us. We're constantly changing, so it's interesting to sort of just have this old remit of like, you're this person, I'm this person, this is how we get on and how we interact, and it should never change at all. And if it does, there's going to be trouble. Or you're a bad person for letting that person go out of your life. So I think we have to kind of be a bit more realistic about the changing natures of who we are and other people as well. Yeah,
we've spoken about this at length, haven't we? Just like friendships and...
It sounds like we're going to have another conversation after this.
Shall I be the mediator?
How would you recommend
By the way,
telling your co-host that you spend too much time No, I mean, we have spoken a lot about boundaries and friendship.
Again, it's not making it any better.
I know. we've had many arguments.
We've talked about boundaries, Charles.
But that's actually a sign of a good friendship, though, isn't it? A healthy friendship where you can actually talk about those things.
We haven't been talking about boundaries. About other people, not us.
I've had to put in some boundaries. No, we have had similar conversations with regards to our friendship, where we've spoken about, I don't know, like miscommunications, but we've also spoken about it in general, in the context of other, my friends or Giles's friends or both of our mutual friends, and sometimes it sounds really bad, because I was thinking about this recently, when you sort of outgrow someone, quote unquote, but that kind of implies, the word outgrow kind of implies that you're growing bigger than them or you're better than them. And then you start to think, oh God, I don't want people to think that I think that I'm better than them. But it's more, you're just in different different stages of your life, or your values don't align anymore. And it can be really uncomfortable, both for the other person and for yourself, to kind of start setting those boundaries, and or if you feel like you're being taken advantage of in a friendship or a relationship or a work situation, to then suddenly withdraw, because if you've been giving too much of yourself, it's then so shocking for the other party for you to then suddenly withdraw all of that.
Yes, it's true. It's really hard, and people will pick up on that, and that they won't like it necessarily. So it's like, it's about in those moments
looking through your window in a rainy night. Why are we not friends anymore?
Sending those kind of gifts you find on WhatsApp. But I think it's and again, I kind of talk about this in the book, is that it's really important in those moments when you're getting someone coming up against that, to sort of have the people around you who are supportive of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to change, and just reminding yourself of your why. Why are you doing this? Why was this so important? And I kind of go on about the why a lot. Giles probably knows, going about the why a lot. Why is my favourite word, but why is everything. That will really that will take you through really difficult times. That will help you carry on and persevere and be determined. And I think, for all of us, in no matter what we're doing, if you can take yourself back to, well, why did I start this in the first place? Why was this important to me? Then actually I think it really helps us to stay kind of firm and on that path, even when we get resistance from different people in our lives.
I love that. Yeah, it's so true. Again, I wonder how many people know their why. How many people have actually spent time thinking about that, or if we just kind of bumble through life and never really think about, actually, why am I doing this? Why do I want certain friendships, or why do I want this out of my career, or whatever it is? It's
it's the start of any change, really, isn't it? It's like, it's your why, and then what, why do you want to do this? What do you want to change? And then how? And those 3 stages, I think, really help you to see clearly what is going on, and actually to make it happen. Because so often we get a feeling something's not right, we know we want to change something, but it's about the kind of then following through with the what specifically, and then the how. And actually the how's really easy, because I reckon if you've got the why and the what, you're okay with the how.
Well, I think this is where a lot of people go wrong, isn't it? Because we tend to do, what do I want, how do I get it, and we never even think about why.
No, that's true.
Really.
That's true.
And so we get so caught up on, how is this going to happen? How is this? And when is it going to? I need it now. And
we forgot about when.
Oh no, sorry, Wen. Sorry.
God.
And that's why the how kind of doesn't work, or we give up on it, or it breaks down, because we haven't really got clear on the when. I'm going to have to write an addendum.
Also,
to my book.
we haven't even.
That was a chapter I didn't write.
And also, we didn't even talk about if.
What?
That's such a Giles thing to say.
There's no if,
Mr. Pessimist.
There's no if it's going to happen, Giles. There's no if. The when I'll accept, but not
okay,
if.
all
Not
right.
if.
Sorry.
Do you know what, Radha? I'm glad that you are in Giles's life as well, because the more people like that in his life, we might eradicate the if.
Okay.
Because I'm the same, like, with all the podcast stuff. Whenever we're like, well, I'm like, it's going to happen. Oh no,
Okay.
it's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's useful to think about if. It's useful. I think if I don't know what I'm talking about on this podcast now. What am I saying? Sounds like a carrot. I've said it so often, so much the words become a bit. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, if is an important word too, Giles.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think of.
I'm going to hold on to it.
That's the clip. That's the clip we're going to use on Instagram.
I would say.
If is an important.
Well, I would
word.
say what if. What if?
Yeah.
And actually, people say, when I first started off doing like TV and radio, people would say to me, I'd just email loads and loads of people. They go, but Radha, they're really important people. Like, oh my God, you can't do that. And I'd be like, yeah, but what if?
Yeah.
What if they replied? Like, what, I think approaching some elements of life is a little bit of like a, wow, what if? Like, how far could this go? Like, what could happen? As an excitement.
Yeah.
So we think so much about outcome that we lose that kind of energy of, I wonder what. I wonder. When we're little, we really have that what if. And as adults, we're like, we go like you said, Sophie, we go the other way round. We go the reverse way.
Yeah.
So I think the if is a great word.
No, it is. It is. I know. Well, that's why I said it. But I am a great dreamer. I've always been a daydreamer, and I always think like it is good to dream big. If you're going to dream, you might as well dream big.
So got nothing to lose.
Yeah. So what if is definitely there for me. Like, I know you think I'm like just like, oh, it's not going to happen.
No, but you do need a bit of realism, don't you? You do need, you do need, it's, like you said, everything balanced. You need some what if and dreams, but you also need some pragmatism. You need to know when the right time is. I always go on about, there are times in life for expansion and there are times in life for consolidation, and we need to know what's helpful is we need to know when those periods are, because I'm a really impatient person. I'm like, it should be happening now. Why isn't it happening now? That means it will never happen.
Yeah.
But actually it's it's helpful to align kind of the energy we put into something with recognizing if that is a period of time when it could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to say, do you know what? I really want to do that, but now's not the right time. But that doesn't mean I'm giving up on it. It just means I'm parking it here and I'm going to come back to it. And I think that's also helpful to know, because otherwise you just bang your head against a wall and end up getting really cross and upset.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes in terms of timing, this is where having a good connection to your gut and your instinct really helps. At least I've found, for me it has. Like, when sometimes you get an idea to do something and you're like really excited about it, you're like, yes, this is going to be amazing, and but your gut is kind of like, not yet, it doesn't feel quite ready yet.
Yes.
And then you go through the process and then it all ends up happening the way it's meant to happen, and in divine timing or whatever. But yeah, I guess like sort of sitting and being quiet with that idea can really come in handy when you're feeling impatient and jittery, like, oh, I want it to happen now, like, taking a step back, I guess, would maybe help that.
I think it would definitely help that. And I think also life just kind of tend to whisper things at you, and sometimes things you don't want life to whisper at you, but sometimes it does. You're like, oh, okay, but it does. You do tend to get, an idea comes, and then you might meet someone here, and might meet someone there, and you're like, oh, this feels like something's happening, but I'm not quite sure it's quite there yet. And often it doesn't happen how we think it's going to happen, but something will happen like it, or aligned to it, or similar to it. And I suppose, like getting angry and frustrated and impatient, I'm talking about myself here, it's not going to help. It's just going to cause a lot of resistance. And actually all you're doing is just wasting your energy, when maybe that time in your life, you've got family commitments, or you've got something you need to sort out first, or maybe you need to build your foundations before you can launch onto something bigger that's going to be more meaningful. So I think, just like any good recipe, you've got to have the right things at the right time and put the right bits in. Oh, you can tell I'm a great baker, can't you? Put in the right bits at the right this, that, and the other of the recipe. Otherwise, you have the same ingredients, but it doesn't work. It doesn't taste nice. It doesn't sustain. And I think changing your life, are more sustainable, and they work better, and they're more meaningful when actually you can listen to all those things come together at the right time.
Well, I was going to talk to you about that, like emotional toolkits, because that's another thing you talk about in the book. What kind of things should we be putting in our emotional toolkits? I mean, obviously, we're not going to put the word if in there. But what other things can we be putting in there?
So I'm one of those people who really likes the how.
Yeah.
I get really fed up with people going on about things, and it's really interesting and it's great. But I'm like, well, all right, but what do I do now then? Come on, just tell me. It's like love yourself. It's like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like I know I want to do it. I've been wanting to do that for ages, but you have to tell me what I do now practically.
What's something tangible?
Yeah. Oh, well, what's the point otherwise? Nothing changes if you don't have anything to work with. So, emotional toolkits. I mean, it's so many different things. I mean, I tried in my book to talk about things that people don't often talk about, or to reframe things. So, for example, comfort. So emotional comfort, emotional sort of safety, that feeling of, being secure and emotionally safe is really important. And we talk about it for little children, a blanket, are they hungry? What do they need to comfort themselves? Why are they crying? What do they need? And I don't think we do that for ourselves as adults. We don't think about what we need. We just know we're stressed, or we're cross or something. But to actually ask ourselves, what do we need? And a lot of the time, I think we need to feel safe, and we need to feel, by that I mean that someone's listening to us, that someone is not going to, judge us, abandon us, make a comment about us, in terms of if we show them who we really are. So I think, comforting yourself, kind of feeling emotionally safe is really important. I also put in the book about hope. So, again, people say to me, oh, Radha, you're living in this dream world where, you're hopeful about everything. And I'm like, well, I'm not always hopeful about everything at all. But for me, hope is just being open to the possibility of something getting better. It doesn't mean being positive. It doesn't mean being, ridiculously out of touch with reality. It just means that you're open to the possibility that something might improve. And I think hope, we don't really talk about cultivating hope as a tool. We talk about it as a concept, or, maybe something in a speech someone says. But for me, I think you can find hope in looking around yourself at people being kind to you, looking at nature. All of these things have hope instilled in them, lyrics in a song, for example. And also I think the other thing in the toolkit, just to kind of pick out 3, is very much around, embracing every single emotion that comes up. So one chapter in the book is kind of likens all of the sort of the nasty, inverted commas, feelings that we don't want to have as kind of house guests that turn up to your house party. You've invited all the lovely feelings like happiness and joy, and you're like, oh, brilliant, they're coming, but they don't turn up, and instead you get, anger and despondency and despair, and they're like banging on the door like, we want to come in, and if we kind of keep them out and we shut them out, things just get worse. The best thing to do is to let them in, see them, talk to them, kind of, sit with them with support if you need that support, and to try and listen to what they're trying to tell you. Because, again, feelings can come up, and they don't necessarily tell us anything. But very often, feelings that come up will be trying to sort of let you know something. Either that you need, like I said, support, you need to kind of have more time to yourself, maybe you need to understand yourself a bit better, maybe you need to stop being so hard on yourself, maybe you need to express yourself, like you said, Sophie, before, and have a good cry and be authentic. That they're sometimes they're telling you something, especially recurrent feelings. And I think that's also a helpful thing to put in your toolbox.
There's so much in there that I love. It's so true. And I guess in terms of the last one, you were speaking about expressing your emotions. all of those feelings that you were describing, anger, fear, despondency, I guess they're all kind of like suffering emotions, and pain is like the umbrella for all of them, I guess. And if you're in pain, or someone's in pain, emotional pain or physical pain, you would, tend to that and delve deeper and sort of try and find out the why.
Yes.
Why are you in pain? And I absolutely love that, because often we feel these emotions, we don't even take the time to work out what the underlying issue is and why we're feeling that, whether it be sort of like jealousy or social media is so bad for sort of triggering all these emotions. But you see something that triggers you on social media and you don't think, oh, what is it within me that's actually causing that? And it's usually a pain underneath all of these other layers of the onion. And taking the time to really work through that is so important. I also kind of get the impression that everything that you're speaking about, they're all kind of a bit of a muscle that you have to grow, because in terms of, for example, listening to yourself and working out what you need and making yourself feel safe, I think a lot of people haven't used that muscle for so long. It's quite weak. I'm definitely one of these people. You need to keep consciously making the effort to do that, I guess.
Yes, 100%. And I think also society doesn't do us any favours, because it frames all of the things that I've just been talking about as fluffy, or things that don't really matter, or like I said, things that, for nursery school children. One of my real passions to do in life is to try and harden up those things, to say, actually, these are really important. They're just as important as all the other advice that you might give someone, or just as important as medical advice, for example. These things are just as important to that, and we need to start framing them as essentials. How to cultivate hope, how to help yourself feel safe in life. These are basics. These are, but and yet they're dressed up in a sort of fluffy way, or they're not spoken about, or they're kind of just said, oh yeah, that's someone just going on about airy fairy stuff, and it's not. It's real, and it matters, and it helps people, and it supports people. And I think one of the other chapters in the book is about anger, and I really wanted to do a chapter about anger because we never talk about it. We always push it away. Like we talk about sadness, that's acceptable. We don't really talk about anger. It's seen as something that we shouldn't even sort of admit we feel. But again, we do everyone a disservice by doing that. So, anger expressed in a safe and healthy way is really important. And actually, I liken it on a sort of a piano scale, if you like. So at one end of that scale, you've got sort of sadness or despair, which has very low energy to it. There's not much that's going to change out of that. Anger is a little sort of step up from that, in that if you see something that makes you cross or angry, or you want, that's the energy behind anger is change. You want something to change, you want something to move. And so it's got a lot more momentum to that emotion than sadness. So within anger, although it's framed really badly, and again, I obviously say that with the remit of expressing it in a safe way, in a healthy way. But, if you think about all the social change that's happened across the world, when things have got better in life and when wrongs have been called out, they've started with anger. They've started with someone saying, no, this is not right. And that momentum then to change something. So, feeling angry in your own life can actually be a really helpful push, if you like, to change something and to make something different. So I'm really keen on, like I said, I wanted to write the book and make it a bit different and make it about things that we don't really talk about, reframe things that I think society frames in negative ways, and just to open up ideas to something different about how to stay well. How can we be well in life and manage life using things that we haven't really thought about using before?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In terms of anger as well, I guess, would you say anger and passion are kind of like two sides of the same coin? Like,
yeah, I would, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's different types of anger. You might have, that typical anger of like, no, an anger about an injustice or something fires you up and like, no, I'm really passionate about this. I need to do something. And then often there's sort of other emotions that are masking anger, maybe, and it comes out and manifests in different ways and stuff like that.
Yes.
I was going to say as well, have you found, because often, the things that you were talking about, like the self-care stuff, really, do you feel like people tend to see them as more of a feminine thing, and so then women might make more of an effort than men to do that sort of stuff, and perhaps it in your medical experience as well?
I definitely think there's the conversation is more acceptable and sort of allowed, in inverted commas, more with women than men, in terms of you know, having a break, relaxing, resting, looking after yourself, self-care. I think we're really bad at encouraging, you know, boys, men, you know, to actually feel like they're allowed to do that, and that they're allowed to say that and show that side of them, and also to say that they need that. And it's just bizarre to me. It doesn't make any sense as to why that would be different. And yet we have dressed it up in that way for so long that it's become ingrained. And, you know, like I say, we're all kind of victims of conditioning. We all kind of grow up in this world, and we absorb things, you know, either overtly or subconsciously, and we take them on board and then we become them. And it's only when then life gets really difficult or we have a crisis that we then think, God, why on earth haven't I done this before?
Yeah.
And, you know, often when you see other people, if you've not seen someone for a long time and they've completely changed their life, or they seem really different, often they've had a really big life event and a really difficult time. And sometimes we do have to go through those things. We can't eradicate that at all, because that's what life is about. But I really wanted in this book to almost say, is there a way to sort of get there a bit earlier with a bit less pain and a bit less of that sort of awful stuff happening to you? Can we kind of support each other to work out how to do that a bit better and a bit earlier?
It's so important. And there's so much going on in the world at the moment as well, where people are having these huge life changes, and you know, even stuff like breakups or the death of a loved one, or, you know, losing a job and stuff like that. They're like wake up calls, I mean, you know, or alarms. And it does make you think, you know, I'm sure we've all been through them, but it does make you think, God, I wish I'd come to those conclusions without having to go through that.
I know. And I mean, again, like sometimes we need to go through things, because you only go, you know, when you go through things, you really learn them, don't you? It's a bit like, you know, I mean, there's like a sort of thing about teaching, you know, like some people need to see it, or people need to do it, some need to read it or whatever. And I think we do need to experience stuff to really learn the lesson, but it's about kind of how long that learning goes on for, how painful that is. And actually, again, it's not, you know, whatever we do for ourselves, it then spreads to other people around us. So it's not just about us and one individual. It's about, I suppose, you know, when anyone else makes a change in their life that's for the better, or you like the look of, you're like, oh, how did you do that? What did you do? Like, tell me about that, because I'd like a bit of that too. So it is a bit of a ripple, I think, and I think that's what's so interesting, that with one person making a few little changes or understanding something, a whole other swathe of people can actually really benefit from that. And that's what I love as well.
Yeah, because self-development stuff, or working on yourself, taking the time, or as we were talking about boundaries, it can come across from an outsider's perspective as quite selfish. Actually, I've always been such a huge believer of, you know, put yourself first, do the work on yourself, because then you have more to offer others, and you have more energy for the people that you love, more time, you know, you're inspiring other people.
It's the air mask, oxygen mask thing, isn't it, in the plane. Give it to yourself first before, and then you can help the other people. It's
yeah, exactly. It's like a ripple effect.
But I think in relationships as well, like we often think we're doing someone a favour by staying in that dynamic, but actually if you look at what they're getting from that dynamic, it's not healthy for them either. Let's say they're being quite controlling, you're allowing them to control you, that's not great for you, but also it's not great for them either. So you know, when you shift, you know, obviously a relationship is a dynamic, you know, that's locked in, and once one side shifts, the other has to shift by definition, because it's not propping it up anymore. So that will cause changes in that person's life, which again they'll have to unravel, and who knows where that might lead them. So it's really interesting. It's a bit like a domino effect.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, Radha, it's been so lovely to talk to you. Thanks so much. Can I ask one more question?
No. No, I'm joking. Of course you can.
No, I was just going to say, because we talked about like tangible things we can take away. Is there one or maybe two tangible daily practices we can make? I'm going to say that. Do you know what? I'm going to say that again, because I said
tangible.
Tangible was wrong.
Hold on. Can I just say, the other day, Giles described himself as a, like, don't tell Radha what the actual word is. What do you think he was saying? He described himself as an autham.
An autham? Well, I would say that's a combination of an author and...
Oh, maybe that's what you...
An author and a...
Maybe that's... You've created a new thing.
What are your other roles? I was thinking broadcaster.
No, it was... I was talking to someone who'd lost one of their parents, and they were saying that they'd become an orphan.
Oh,
And I changed the N to an M.
Oh,
I became an orpham.
So no, Autham. Autham.
oh, as
Autham.
in ORPH.
Yeah.
AUTH.
But actually, that's quite good. So
but
an
that's what
author
it was.
author with dead parents is an
Yeah,
author.
Autham. But it was like, and it was so funny. It's like,
Yeah, it was very funny
on the
for
video-
Sophie. It wasn't so funny for me.
I honestly cried with laughter.
Yeah.
I was like, tears were coming down, and then Giles was like, "I like how you're laughing at the fact that I'm an
An orphan.
I
Yeah.
can't even say the word."
Yeah, it's great that you're laughing about the fact that I have no parents. Anyway,
Sometimes we need to invent words because there aren't enough words.
exactly.
Describe
I'm going to
who
write
we
it down
are.
now. Orpham.
Autham. Right. What were you actually saying?
I was going to say, right, I've got one more question for you.
Go on, Giles.
Because obviously we talked about tangible things we can do. Are there one or two sort of daily practices we can be doing, that maybe would make more significant life changes?
So the one thing that really helps me, the one thing I think is really, really useful is literally in each moment. So let's say you're having a really bad time, you're feeling really sad, you're feeling really low, to stop and say to yourself, ask yourself this question, say, in this one moment, what choices do I have right now to help me feel a bit better? So that might be, I can sit here and have a cry. It might be I go out for a walk. It might be I call someone. It might be whatever. What are the options you've got? Because we do have choice. Although things are difficult and although feelings overwhelm us, and that's absolutely fine, we still do have a choice around what we do. And I think this is where action is so important. So in that one moment, think about the options you have and what are they going to lead to? What are each of those going to lead to? What repercussions they're going to have? Are they going to work? And then try to just make a better choice for yourself. And that sounds really simple, but in that moment, all we have and the power we have is to make a choice, a good choice or a better choice for ourselves. And once you start to do that and make that little bit of a choice in that moment, you'll do it again and again and again. And then you'll start to realize that actually your actions and your ability to choose can help you. And that's where that trust comes in. And that's where that sense of power, your own internal power comes in. And then it becomes a habit. And then you start to think, actually, I can do this. I can manage this. So if something else happens to me in life, I know what to do because I've practiced, I've done it. So I would say those moment-to-moment choices, build that trust in yourself and realize actually just how much power you have to help yourself feel a little bit better. It won't always work and you won't always be able to make that better choice, and that's absolutely fine. But just to think about what you could do. And I think that's probably my key takeaway. That's what I do in my own life as well.
Well, I'm definitely going to be doing that.
Yeah, same. Yeah, because we tend to, when we have a problem, we tend to just sort of crack on, gloss over everything, not even stop. So yeah, just actually stopping and trying to work out what's the next step.
What can I do right now that might make me feel a little bit better?
Amazing. And buy the book. Where can people buy your book?
So it's on Amazon. It's you can find it on my website as well. The paperback is coming out in June, which is exciting.
Amazing.
So yeah, go and find it, and I hope it helps.
Perfect timing.
Know your own power. And where can people find you as well on all the socials and stuff?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Dr. Radha Modgil, Instagram at Dr._Radha, and my website, which is drradha.co.uk.
Amazing.
Oh, thank you, Radha. It's been
Thank
very
you
lovely
so
to
much.
talk to you.
It's been
Thank
really,
you.
really lovely. Thank
Thank
you
you.
both.
Thank you.